Welcome back to Capitol Review. I'm Mark Hall. President Trump marking 6 months in office in his second term. In several Truth Social posts, the president highlighted what he says are 6 months of wins and praised his administration. He says his second term is being, quote, hailed as one of the most consequential periods of any president. He also said that today the USA is the hottest and most respected country anywhere in the world. Returning to Capitol Review is Dr. Todd Belt. He's a professor and director of political management, the master's program at George Washington University. Dr. Belt, thank you for joining us.
Mark, it's great to be on with you as always. Thanks for having me.
We're always glad to have you. President Trump not holding back in his 6 months in office, in his second term. How would you summarize his first 6 months?
Well, gee, did we expect any hyperbole from Donald Trump? Of course we did. And he certainly is reading off the list of what he sees as his accomplishments. But it has been a pretty turbulent first 6 months. I mean, he did get one piece of legislation through. Granted, it was a big one, that big, beautiful bill. The jury's still out on what's going to happen with it, though. We have to see how it's implemented to really figure out what impact it's going to have on people. We've had just a load of executive orders and a bit of chaos when it comes to international policy with the tariffs and the inability to strike some of those peace deals.
Experts talk about his big, beautiful bill, supposed to add maybe $3 to $4 trillion in debt. How do you think he was able to achieve this? How do you think he was able to get this across the finish line if those numbers are even close to being accurate?
Right. Well, this is a different Trump from Trump 1.0 during the first term, where he didn't really like to get involved at all with congressional negotiations. But this time around, he was the closer. He went in and he threatened people, and he told them that he would implement the bill in certain ways that would benefit their communities. So he was involved in the process, not exactly early on, but later on, and was able to get it across the finish line. And this was important because there were a lot of people in his own party who were worried about that bill that they were going to leave for future generations that you were talking about.
Well, Dr. Belt, his administration continues to battle criticism about its handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case. Do you think that this is going to be a problem for him moving forward?
I think this is one that might linger, and there's a couple reasons for that. If you look at Donald Trump and how he has always gone about things, is he has said that there are elites in Washington, D.C., and they are protecting these global elites through the deep state, and he was going to go there and smash it. And these are the people that followed him. A lot of them believed in these sorts of conspiracies, or even if they didn't believe in the conspiracies, they believed that the deep state was a problem and had persecuted him and were causing problems for common Americans. Turn the table, and now Donald Trump is the one in power and has the ability to release documents, and now it's looking more like he and his administration are blocking the flow of information that they believe would lead to this client list for Epstein that they thought that they were going to get, and other things. So Donald Trump has become the problem that they sent him there to solve, and that's why this has been his own base turning on him rather than him just dealing with the enemy, which is the other party.
Do you see him using the strategy of distraction? He just recently talked about that the commanders should change their name back to the Redskins.
Right. He talked about that. He's been putting motorcycle and jet ski things on his Truth Social account. He's also had Tulsi Gabbard refer these charges against the Obama administration. He's released the MLK documents as well. There's a lot he's throwing against the wall to try to change the subject. But the problem with conspiracy theorists is that they are not easily distracted. They are pretty narrow-minded and singularly focused on what they want to hear. And they're going to want these Epstein files, and they're not going to rest until they get them.
Dr. Belt, what's next for President Trump and the administration moving forward?
I think what's next is implementation of this big bill, trying to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to expand the deportations, which was a big part of this, what they're going to do with the U.S. military spending and the development of the Golden Dome, which is also another big part of it, and how they're going to try to deal with some of the effects of the Medicaid cuts and the SNAP, the food stamp cuts as well, so that they can manage them as they go into these the next election. Some of them don't kick in in until after the election, some of them beforehand. But of course, Donald Trump doesn't want to lose those seats. That's why he's working on gerrymandering and everything like that before we get to next year.
Todd Belt, thank you so very much for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
We'll wrap things up right after the break. Please stay with us.